Hey, gang. Welcome to the 10% Happier podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. Today, we're talking about how when you live an overly regimented, optimized, metrics-driven life, it can be what my guest calls a joy blocker. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about the fact that we all have, whether we're aware of it or not, a kind of deep hunger or ache. And that deep hunger or ache can actually be a kind of compass and tell us what we want to live for, what we want to fill that hole with. My guest is Kate Bowler, PhD, who is a 4-time New York Times bestselling author. Her latest book is called Joyful Anyway, and that's the book we're going to focus on in this interview. She's also a podcaster. She's got a podcast called Everything Happens. This interview is a ton of fun. There's a lot of laughing and joking and also a lot of profundity. I think you're going to enjoy it. Kate Bowler, after the break. A few things before we hear from our sponsors. I highly recommend that you head on over to danharris.com to check out my newish meditation app, 10% with Dan Harris. Right now, we're in the middle of this really cool series where every Sunday, the legendary Dharma teacher Sharon Salzberg is leading a live session where she does some teachings on the Buddha's Eightfold Path. You can think of the Eightfold Path as the Buddha's foundational list. It's his cookbook for leading a happy life. Sharon does some teaching on one aspect of the path. She guides a meditation, and then she takes your questions. We're in the middle of it right now, but it's not too late to join. You can sign up at danharris.com, and you can watch the first few sessions on video replay and then join the rest of them live. It's really cool. One of the keys, I believe, and this is an evidence-based assertion, one of the keys to starting a habit or maintaining a habit like meditation is doing it with other people. And that's what we're doing over on 10% with Dan Harris. Life is better in the carpool lane. Join the party. We'll be right back after this. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. We talk about mental health more openly these days, but asking for help can still feel hard, and BetterHelp's latest research confirms this. BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report surveyed 2,000 Americans and revealed that 85% of Americans believe getting support is wise, yet 74% say society discourages people from doing so. I find these numbers personally quite disturbing. Nobody should feel stigmatized for getting help. You don't feel funny about getting your heart checked, so getting your brain and mind checked should be completely fine. I see a therapist, have seen a therapist since I was a little boy. It is an enormously helpful thing to do, and it's also, not for nothing, not self-indulgent, because taking care of yourself helps you be better resourced and better prepared to take care of other people. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 6 million people globally. Don't let stigma stand in the way of support. Start therapy with BetterHelp. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/happier. That's betterhelp.com/happier. Kate Bowler, welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. If you're comfortable, I'd love to start with a little bit of your personal backstory. You don't come to joy through the front door.
That's a great way of putting it. No, I had to climb through a back window and then find a fire escape.
We're laughing about it, but the story's tough. Again, if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to hear it.
I had like a pretty straightforward hope for my life. I just wanted to be an academic. I just really wanted to be a professor in a tower with many gargoyles. And my parents were university professors. And so when I got this job at Duke University, like right out of grad school, it was like beyond anything I could imagine. And it was just one of those seasons of life where it feels like it's 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, 8 steps forward. Like you're trying very hard to do the math, and some things come together and some things come apart. So I had really wanted to have a baby, and I was struggling through years of infertility, and I really wanted to do a good job at this like amazing opportunity. But I found I had really terrible chronic pain that meant that I lost use of my arms for a couple years, which was not like peak season for voice dictation at that time. So it was just like everything was more than a grind, more than a slog. It was like always pressing against the limits of despair. And then I just had this one season where all of a sudden everything came together. I had this like perfect little smushy baby that smelled like applesauce and cookies. And I had married my high school sweetheart, and like I published my first book. It's called Blessed. I was so excited. And it's just like a whole season in the sun where everything was really beautiful. And my life felt like it was adding up to something meaningful to me. And then I started getting weird stomach pain, and I went to the doctor for 6 months and was sent home with like Pepto-Bismol. And then one day I was like, no, I'm serious. Like, the pain is truly unbearable. I'm not leaving until you get me a different scan. And then I got a call in my office the next day that I had stage 4 colon cancer, and that I probably wouldn't like live through that year or the next. And that was like it was like that really marked the end of a life that I really loved and that I thought I'd worked for.
Well, you had worked for it. And yet life knows how to throw a right hook. In this case, several of them. And yet you're here, which I'm happy about.
I'm actually a hologram, and this is a very realistic AI experience. Surprise.
The tech is
it's
good.
Amazing. Wow.
So when was the diagnosis? And I don't know much about the stages of cancer, notwithstanding the fact that my dad was an oncologist. But I think
really? Yes,
I think
4 is the
four
worst
is
one.
not. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't graduate to 5. 5 is just not aliveness. Yeah. 4 is like it's spread everywhere and is likely it has spread beyond the original organ. And stage 4 colon cancer was at the time not a great prognosis. I spent really 2 years very intensely doing chemotherapy and immunotherapy. So they kept giving me sort of 3 months, and then I'd get another scan and I'd find out if I'd get another 3 months to live. And it just kind of went like that, vine to vine, for several years. And then eventually they realized, wow, this immunotherapy is really working. And it's just very funny that like when you survive something that terrible, it's not like anybody comes to your door with like confetti and it's like, surprise, you're going to live. It's just like a very incremental sense that expectations are slowly being changed around you. And by the time I got to 5 years, I was like, wait a minute, I think I'm really going to live. So it's been 9, almost 10 years since, about 5 since I have not had to be in like very, very active treatment. Now I just have to get sort of every 6 months, I have to go into the hospital and have some stuff scraped out. And then they look concerned and then they're like, you'll be fine. It has not ever gone back to easy, but I have lived so much longer than I ever thought I would. So it's given me a really long time to feel both deeply grateful and also right back to being a human being with regular human being problems and the same like boredom, irritation, and like grouchiness at my fellow faculty members, like constantly.
That's, on the one hand, not surprising, but on the other hand, a little surprising and awesome that you're admitting it, that you can have this like profound brush with mortality, not like yes. a car almost hit you in the street, like 5 years of I'm swinging, as you said before, vine to vine. I don't, this is my last 3-month tranche. It's existential for a protracted period of time, which in itself has got to be a massive trauma. And then when things settle back down to something approaching normalcy, you're right back at like being bored and impatient.
Should I be skinnier? Like you're just, you're like, should I be skinnier? Am I reading enough? What's my summer challenge? Just like all the regular crap of like, do I have enough supplements in my now $30 water? So it's pretty wild. I mean, they always like to say like, it's the dying who teach you how to live. But I'll tell you, like, I just think that there's an ongoingness to life that will constantly require that you come back to the same question, which is what carries you through both the very difficult times and then the times in which you're just looking into middle distance and saying, is this it? Is this it? Is this it?
Okay, well, that brings us right back to the subject du jour of joy, because so you've now had this experience of having brushes with joy, which I want to hear more about, in, a shit show and in regular life, which turns out is also a shit show.
Yes. Yes. You know me completely. That's exactly right. Yeah. It definitely opened up a question because, my research interest that I've really been working on my whole career is about American stories of health, wealth, and happiness. And so when I was like continued to live and got stuck back in a regular sort of like, I don't want to say malaise, but like that itchy, regular, hungry feeling you get by being a person, it did make me wonder, like, man, is there like another quality of experience that we can have that isn't just trying to get back to sort of like contentment or even regular happiness? And I just noticed that I had these really surreal experiences in the very worst moments of my cancer experience. And I just mean like surreal moments of what I look back and realize like, oh my gosh, that was joy. And they were just so dumb. Like I say dumb because they were so unusual that I felt embarrassed like explaining it to people. Like I was 48 hours from my horrifying, life-changing diagnosis. I was heartbroken. I was so angry. Couldn't plan for a Christmas or a summer. And yet I had this, for a little stretch, this really bizarre, surreal feeling that felt like this, like lift. Like I felt temporarily whole. I felt love. I felt love like everywhere. I felt love from other people. I'm very Jesus-y. Felt love from God. I felt like I couldn't even be mad at people I wished I was mad at because I just like thought they were so beautiful. It was like falling in love with the world all over again. And looking back, I was like, well, that wasn't happiness and that wasn't contentment. So like, what is it about these weird, I had stumbled like into a pocket of joy. So what is it about weird joy that's so unusual that can happen in the very worst of times and then sometimes just like on a very normal Tuesday?
I want to pursue that question, but let's just step back for a second and define some terms. What is the difference between joy in your mind? Because I find that in my experience of hosting the show for more than 10 years, like that, people have very different definitions for the terms we're going to discuss today. So,
Good.
But in your mind, the difference between joy and happiness.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to I hope secretly argue about our definition of happiness because I'm curious about what you'll say.
I just want to say in advance that I will win. It's my show.
I like your determination. I like your.
It will be my source of joy.
You're like, and even if I don't win, I will edit around it.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Post-production dunking on you. It's going to be awesome.
I look forward to feeling demeaned and confused when I listen to it in the future. Well, here's my best go around of like the distinction between joy and happiness. Is that happiness has a distinct experience of ease. Joy is a very big, bright feeling. Happiness has a relaxed quality to its appearance. It will feel very contextual, meaning that it will be built out of many small load-bearing things like how much sleep you've had and the nice cup of coffee in your hand and the ability to call a nice friend later on. It'll be like a Jenga tower of many small incremental things, some built and some just, as the word suggests, hap as in happenstance. So it will very often feel like the things that are happening to you. If happiness has this ease to it, joy is not relaxing at all. Joy is like a big, bright, enlivening feeling. It will, like happiness, engage your reward system, but it also very strangely engages your stress system, which helps explain why it can appear at like very counterintuitive times. As you could have it, in a big crisis or like at a funeral and the pastor has mispronounced your dad's name for the fourth time. And the first, it was sad. And the second, you feel this weird twinge. And by the fourth, you feel this like weird, hysterical, like, oh my gosh, she would have loved this. This is ridiculous. Why am I laughing? I could hate myself. Like joy's sudden appearance is in part because we've got this feeling in joy, like everything is okay and nothing is okay. And for one moment, because joy is extremely temporary, it will feel like temporary wholeness.
Let's stipulate that everything's temporary, but happiness has a little bit more of an edifice to it, whereas joy comes along at surprising moments, and it is it's much more of like a big burst of something rather than the low-slung ranch house of happiness.
Amazing. I think too, what is kind of unusual about joy is it comes to us not just as like a lovely feeling, a lovely temporary feeling, but it's almost like it carries the weight of a story. It will convince us for a moment that it is good for you to be alive. Because you can go from 0 to 100 in a moment of joy. It has an amazing ability to then quiet despair or stories that tell us that it will never be okay, because suddenly it really was okay. And so when we want to look for experiences that kind of have this imprint of joy, we should look for moments like that give us hope, like maybe that lovely things like that will happen in the future. It will feel like delight, because if it's not making you laugh, or if it doesn't feel slightly fun, like, dude, that's not joy. That's just, I don't know, indigestion or,
Right, exactly.
or like hallucinogenics. I don't know. It will delight you. And it looks a lot like gratitude, because it will immediately just make you say, thank you. Thank you so much.
You earlier called yourself Jesus-y. Does joy in your conception have an element of grace?
Oh my gosh. I love that you just said grace. No one else would have said that. Yes. I mean, like the feeling like it's this, like almost like the world is what it is. And then when you experience a moment of joy, it feels like a mercy, like, oh, like, wow, I couldn't have orchestrated. Thank you for it being outside of myself and visiting me. I think that's what makes it like a balm, like can heal parts of you didn't expect, because you can tell when you're experiencing a moment of joy that you're not manufacturing it. And I think that's why it can feel holy in that way, because it feels like it comes from outside of you as a gift.
Whereas happiness often takes work.
Yeah, I think happiness takes a lot of work.
Are you saying we shouldn't do the work of happiness, or that we should do the work of happiness, but also try to, and I think this is the phrase you use, put ourselves in the way of joy too?
I think I'm here to confront you on your happiness show to tell you that happiness is a waste of time. Just joking. I think happiness is a tremendous amount of work, and it's worthy work of doing. I think to the extent that we can change the small parts of our life that ought to be changed to build up a happier life, I am for it, because we can't manufacture joy, because joy is a surprise. The best we can do is not try to build up joy, but try to either put ourselves in the way of joy, or try to just cultivate qualities that expand our capacity to be someone that joy happens to.
Yeah, what would that look like? I'm curious.
It feels weird, because I feel like we should be saying, well, the things that get in the way of joy are sadness. But now we know that joy engages our stress system. So we're like, oh, I think you can be sad. I think you can be sad and still experience moments of joy at the same time. It's happened to me, and that was weird. So it's not sadness. It's not even sort of prolonged periods of almost despair, because a lot of people just go through very difficult seasons and are surprised by glimpses of joy. I think it's going to end up being a lot of the features of our very optimized AI world that will end up producing qualities in us that are joy blockers. Because if joy is a surprise, if you think about all the stuff that makes us like a very good citizen of this new robot world, like most of those qualities, like hyper efficiency, making elaborate routines that no one can possibly interrupt. I know that because I have an elaborate morning routine, an elaborate evening routine. And if you give me like 7 secrets to billionaire, whatever routines, I'm going to read it. Like, I love that stuff. But anything that makes us very planned, very efficient, very uninterruptible is quite likely to make us an increasingly joyless person.
Yes, I've had big stretches in my life where I've been sort of like mirthless and militaristic in my own like approach to what I was calling happiness, but was actually just like optimization.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I think that's so tempting and marketed so aggressively to us that it's almost impossible to tell the difference sometimes. What were some of your, if you don't mind me asking, what were some of your incredible optimizations?
Well, what I'm about to say is just so fucking stupid but here it is, that I had a whole period of time where I believed that I should meditate 2 hours a day. And mind you, this gets even worse. Really, really embarrassing. Bad. What I'm about to say, I just want to signal is bad. But we had just had a baby when I was doing this, right? So really bad, really unkind. I wasn't doing it like while we were doing baby things together. Maybe I did a few times, but that wasn't generally my move. My move was I was working all the time, which also, by the way, was uncharacteristic and thoughtless. I had 2 full-time jobs, one at ABC News and the other doing whatever this thing is that I do. And I had crazy hours, and I would sort of chop up my meditation into these little chunks that I would do throughout the day. And I told myself that this was a way to do it in a way that wouldn't, interrupt my parental duties. But I don't think that A, that was fully true, and B, it was like, why? What was the point? On top of that, I had an exercise regime and would count calories, and I was a vegan, and I'm not saying being a vegan is a bad thing, but like it's a lot of work. And so I was building a real edifice of what I thought was happiness, but it was right back to your Jenga analogy, very easy to interrupt and ultimately did topple.
Especially when it's so close to things that have brought us like enormous work satisfaction, for example, like the ability to break down really complicated things into tiny steps and then to do them a million times. And then congratulations, now you're great at your job. It's so hard not to apply that same direct mentality to what Charles Taylor called the buffeted self, who you really are. I mean, we would say it in very simple terms, like is a problem to be solved, is a project to be managed, and it's totally hermetically sealed and nothing gets in except the things that I have built. That kind of very intense, metric-driven, productivity-driven, industrial self is, I think, the most common definition of what I think we all think of as self-mastery. So, and every time I think I'm not doing it, I'm usually back into doing it at the very moment.
And again, your point is that mode, which it seems like both of us have a proclivity towards, I don't know what the right preposition is there. That mode is a joy blocker.
I think it really is. And that mode will look like self-mastery. It will look like conquering all. It will look great on Instagram. Oh my gosh, we would look so good. And it will slowly suck out of us, because while you're doing it, you are telling yourself the story that it's not a day, it's 24 hours. It's not a sunrise. You're back to your morning routine. Like everything then becomes this very homeworky, project-driven story about who we are and what we're for. And then the second that breaks down, you become unable to do your homework. Like then this was a horrifying feeling I had very early on in being sick, is like, well, if I can't be all these things and do all these things, like, am I failing? I look around and all I'm doing is frankly wearing out the people I love, because now I have all these needs. I'm in an unbelievably expensive medical treatment. So now everybody is having to pay into a medical system. So now I'm impoverishing people. I'm making people sad. Am I now the bad thing? And the amount of shame that comes to people who can't be these self-conquering cyborg masters of the universe is that all those of us who take more than we can give, which will be all of us at some season of our life, will get the mistaken impression that we should have figured out the cure for being human. And then we just didn't.
So it's a deep setup. And it sounded like it really was in your case.
Yeah.
Big setup for making the body blow of the diagnosis even worse.
Yeah. After I got sick, I think my first temptation was like, I have to outperform this. I have to just get back to that person who can be a giver, not a taker. I was just like ruthless with myself. I'm still very prone to having like no mercy for myself, infinite mercy for other people, because other people are allowed to be human, but I got a plan.
If we're establishing that the optimized, metrics-driven, as you said, industrialized self as a joy blocker, it sounds like its cousin or its comorbidity, which is ruthless self-criticism, is another joy blocker.
Yeah, I think that's right. I just was thinking immediately about the way it's marketed specifically to women, too, that has a kind of perfectionism where we should be beautiful, and now we have to age backwards. And I think this is especially where this like paradigm breaks down, is if we think about happiness like this little Jenga tower where we're building up every small incremental thing to make a good life feel at ease all the time. I think a lot of women would add to that they have to be a professional happiness manager for every person in their life, particularly their kids. And that if every single person around them isn't at ease, then they're also failing at being a woman.
Yeah, that tracks based on my female friendships and guests on the show. Okay, so if those are the joy blockers, what can one do to put one's self in the way of joy, even when things are, pretty deeply suboptimal?
One thing you can do, which is really also counterintuitive, is service. There's like a really strange alchemy between giving and getting joy. It doesn't feel like that's very good math. It should be that when you give, you have less, because that's subtraction. And you put in all this effort and wow, somebody else reaped the benefits. But there is like just wonderful studies about like just the incredible emotional lift and connectedness you get through community service, by deep friendships, and partly that's because joy is highly socially contagious. It's actually like harder to have joy alone. I've just known that when I've gone through really tough seasons, there's kind of an accidental narcissism to pain. You can just suddenly start to believe like, of course, this only happens to me. Of course, this happened to me. People won't understand how awful it is. I am alone in this. And the second you start kind of being back involved in serving in other people's lives, like it's a lot easier then to forget your own partly untrue story of how you're the only person who's suffered in the world. And you just start to feel like caught up in other people's hopes and dreams and love. And so, yeah, joy in service is like a kind of a superhighway to opening yourself up to more joy in your life. I think the other major one is trying to rest on the delight piece for a while. Where sometimes we think that we're kind of inundated with like pleasures. You look around and you can watch a movie right away, or like almost everything is instantaneous. But the problem is that it kind of degrades our experience of what actually lights us up. And if you ask people like, what delights you, like makes you in a somewhat embarrassed way be like, "Mo, this is it." Like, I think it's often very hard for people to answer. And if it's hard for people to answer, man, it's pretty hard for other people then to get into your life and to be able to offer you anything when, you need a lift and they want to help. I think it's worth pausing to ask, like, what truly delights you and only you? Because joy is not standard issue. It was made for you. It's not like one of my horrible Mennonite Christmases where like everybody gets the same bag of tube socks and like you get tube socks and you get tube socks. Like it will be weirdly individualistic.
I'm a small business owner, and like many small business owners, I got into this because I am passionate about something. In my case, I'm passionate about up-leveling people's mental health through meditation and other modalities. I did not get into this work, however, to manage payroll. That was not the thing that I was excited about when I started this business. And I think that's very common for small business owners. We start with a spark of insight and passion and excitement, but then we quickly get bogged down in details like payroll, which is why you need a good partner, and which is why I'm proud that one of our sponsors today is Gusto. Gusto is an online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all in one, remote friendly, incredibly easy to use, so you can pay hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. Automatic payroll tax filing, simple direct deposits, health benefits, commuter benefits, workers' comp, 401k, you name it. Gusto makes it simple and has options for nearly every budget. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/happier and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/happier. One more time, gusto.com/happier. One of the things that's coming to mind, and this is kind of related to some of the things you talked about earlier as joy blockers, is like non-distraction. I would imagine constant scrolling indoors with no natural light or nature at all does not put you in the way of joy. I mean, I get delighted every once in a while when I'm scrolling on TikTok, no question about it, but it's not the same thing. Yeah. It's a kind of synthetic version.
And I'm sure you and I have a similar position on this. There's a certain quality of attention that we kind of have to get into a better place of cultivating in order to even be aware of joy if it was coming in the room at all.
That's all true, for sure. To me, like the prototypical example of joy as an act of grace from the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, for me, is sitting on the steps of a building in Harvard Square when I was a junior in high school, summer between junior and senior year. And there were no phones at that time because I am not young. And so this was in the late 80s. And I was just sitting there. I might have been talking to somebody. I can't remember, but it was one of those. New England has these nights that are simultaneously hot, but just like a little bit of cool. So it was just temperate, even though it was July. And I just was overtaken with this sense of everything's okay, which I've had subsequently a few times on retreat, and which if you strive for, you will never experience. But there was something about just the randomness of sitting there undistracted, open, outside where, yeah, I was joy ready in ways that modern life militates against.
That's so right. That makes me want to write down joy ready. I really like that. I think that that's right. Like your eyes, you've got this aperture so that you've kind of let out all the granularity of everything that the world as it is kind of filter in. And then the world as it is all of a sudden gets recast as like, it's almost like it's like falling in love, where it's just like, right. It's beautiful. Right. It's just so beautiful. And then other times I think you kind of have to find the yes inside of a situation where you would otherwise want to say no. I had a very bizarre version of that when I was coming out of a very difficult surgery, and I'd had a doctor I really hated. And I was ready to go home, and they, you go through like the mostly checkout process, and I was waiting for someone to come pick me up, and I'm sitting like in a very normal going home room in the hospital. And the doctor comes in, he's like, "Kate, I'm here to take a surgical drain out of your stomach." And it was one, the doctor I hated. And two, I was not actually aware at that time that I had a surgical drain in my stomach. And I was like, no, no. The answer is no. Like, actually, I just have this nice smooth bandage on my stomach, and everything's all tucked in, and I've got my nice going home clothes on, and my stuff is packed. And the answer to you, sir, is absolutely not. And I don't really know what my plan was, like, go home and do it myself. Like, what was I going to do with that new information? And everything in me was like, absolutely not. But I knew that, of course, like, you don't really get a choice. But if I don't get a choice, is there anything else there? And I just had this weird like sense I should just find a different answer than no. And he had his hands up in front of him because they were clean, I guess, because he was about to tear something horrifying out of my body. And just the way his hands up like that, it just reminded me of when I had this one brother-in-law. He was this big, beefy, he was into wrestling, and he was for a season very into up close magic. So he's always trying to like take coins out from behind my ear, or like just like constantly scarves on scarves out of sleeves that he wasn't wearing. And he was just like such a funny guy, but his hands up like that just really reminded me of like my brother-in-law's up close magic. So instead of saying no to this doctor, I was like, okay, you can take the surgical drain out, but I need you to do it as a magic trick. And it's just like the look of deadness in his eyes as our eyes locked. And it was just like a full confrontation. And then without saying a word, he spun out. And then he like comes in, knock, knock, Kate, I'm here to take a surgical drain out of your stomach and I will do it as a magic trick. And I was like, very like, we had like suddenly grand ceremony between us. So I arranged myself on the hospital bed and like, pulled my shirt up and there's this bandage and he's pulling off the bandage and he's like, look, and I do really appreciate it when you're going through something tough if someone gives you like a very specific description. And he said, you're going to feel a deep pinch and you're going to feel a hard pull. So hard, like I'm going to have to hold on to the side of the bed. And so I closed my eyes and I felt a very deep pinch. And then it felt like an anchor being wrested from the seafloor. It's like my insides are becoming my outsides. And so I opened my eyes and there's this doctor holding what appears to be like 200 million feet of tubing in his hands. And I can see that he has an enormous bright red spray, what is obviously my blood because he did something wrong. And we stared at each other in utter horror. And then he just goes, ta-da! Him being committed to the magic trick, like absolutely put me over the edge. I was truly like joyful about that for like a week, and then what I learned in that insanity is that like sometimes even when you can't say no, see if you can find the yes. But in the yes, this is the bit about the randomness of joy. There is a weird kind of magic that happens where what was supposed to be a horrific experience ends up being a doctor who regularly comes to my lectures now. And so I see him every now and then.
Wow. Ta-da, indeed.
I've really taken that to be like is there a ta-da here somewhere?
Yes.
Somewhere.
Yes.
In the things that I'm not going to be able to control.
Okay, but so that strikes me as a kind of a cousin of gratitude, which is a term that you used earlier. And all of that feels to me like a trainable skill. I know we're saying that joy is grace, like you can't manufacture it, but having a background attitude of not taking stuff for granted, of looking out for delight and things that you're glad about, that feels like the opposite of a joy blocker.
I'm like writing down background attitude now because that's really good. I totally agree. Yeah, I do. I think that there's like in any good and beautiful thing that happens, I do think there's a little window of where there's possibility for action and play and engagement with what's happening. So in these background attitudes, I agree. I think finding a little movement where it looks like there's none. And I think we see it in, this is partly why I'm kind of in love with Alan Alda. Are you also in love with Alan? I feel like everyone should be in love with Alan Alda.
I'm in like with Alan Alda. He's not somebody I think about much, but maybe you can tip me over.
This is about to change for you because this man, in response, like he did, he had a long, of course, amazing, impressive career in acting, but was a science communicator for a really long time. And so he started this incredible program with a university in New York to teach improv skills to doctors and science communicators of all kinds, and realized that the more you can add play and responsiveness in, frankly, like very emotionally fraught conversations, the more you can find little windows of possibility for like misunderstanding. Is there something I can make the truth more evident to you? But also I think just for like meaning making in what otherwise feels like, man, like I just get handed a diagnosis or I just get handed the life I have. So I loved the idea that there's just so much when we're trying to like respond to reality that if we can reframe it a little bit closer to play and delight, I think it's easier for us to bring our full selves into a situation that can otherwise feel very brittle and frankly like quite traumatic.
What I'm about to say is a little bit of a conversational bank shot, but the what you're saying reminds me of the emphasis that you hear in Zen Buddhism on spontaneity, that if you're not so stuck in the swirling stories of your mind, past, future, what are people thinking of me, et cetera, that you can be more awake and aware in the moment and therefore more responsive, all of which seems like another way to be joy ready.
I really like that. Yeah. And people are thinking, though, Dan, I'll just tell you that they like you and it's going really well. So you don't have to have that thought anymore. But in case you're wondering, I'm just doing consumer response.
I can tell you I get plenty of the opposite feedback on the regular. So
no, my opinion is declarative and I'm a professor. So you're welcome.
Right, exactly. This is an argument I'll let you win.
Thank you. I felt right. I felt right when I was saying it.
Okay. So your book, which is called Joyful Anyway, talks a lot about how to put yourself in the way of joy. But you talk about something called the ache. I'm curious what you mean by that. What is the ache and how is it related to joy?
I was looking for the right kind of historical and philosophical, just like emotional framework. For many of us, the default state coming into our desire for joy is like, why does it feel like there's a kind of bittersweet longing inside of us so often? I mean, sometimes it feels like Hungry, Hungry Hippos, which was a game I was very good at. It really struck me as a question that felt almost inappropriate to ask for someone like me who has so much to be grateful for and has been given back so much. And so I wondered, like, why is it that I feel the ache is feeling of like longing, of restlessness, of incompleteness. And it can either be seen in a theological framework as a kind of like missing piece, and then you find your rest in God. So I teach in a seminary, so it's not like I'm not like ready with all these responses. So I just kind of went looking for why it is that language and that sort of indictment of the human condition is so common. Very often, frankly, the language that's used for it is often like a musical analogy. It feels like the blues, or in Portuguese, saudade, or this kind of like truths you can only sing in a minor key. And so I think we either have to decide when we feel like that again, we're a problem to be solved and that's just like another thing to fix about it, or it's a glitch in the system and there's something wrong with us. And I'm not saying there's not anything specifically wrong with me, not that I'd want that, but I'm just saying that's not necessarily untrue. But if there is this ache inside, like, does this mean that we're more or less capable of experiencing joy? So I kind of went talking to like as a series of historians and theologians and psychologists, and I loved my conversation with Father Ron Rolheiser, who's a professor and a Spiritan priest. And he was like, look, Kate, this thing that you're kind of describing as a sort of character flaw is so universal in the human condition. He's like, as babies, we're born crying. There's a lot of crying in the middle. There really is a lot of crying at the end. So you can either decide this is an incompleteness, or you can say that this ache, this too, has a kind of holiness to it. It's an engine, and you can either use it to sort of kind of endlessly snack forever, is to have these endless hungers, or you can use it to point yourself toward these like deeper, more satisfying, still lovely things on offer. That really, I found it very encouraging to think about the ache that's inside of all of us, how very normal it is, especially around middle age, to feel like I don't know what completeness feels like. And then to start using that to reach for things that are more satisfying than like what you described as like the million synthetic versions on offer.
So I can see how in a, again, to use your phrase, Jesus-y context, the ache would be described as the God-shaped hole.
Oh, yes, they would. Yeah. Well, if you think that there's a solution to it, but it's less a hole that then has to be plugged and more a quality of being alive.
What I was trying to get to there is that, so in Buddhism, there's this idea of the hungry ghost. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
Yeah, but tell me.
But for the viewers and listeners, these kind of mythical creatures that have huge stomachs but very narrow necks. So this just incredible, insatiable hunger that can never be sated. That is the way many of us are. And that hunger is based on a misconception, a fundamental misconception that there is something solid there to be hungry. that the self that we're building up and defending, ultimately, in the Buddhist view, is an illusion. And so you can uproot the ache right there at the level of the self, is, I believe, the Buddhist proposition. So anyway, I'm saying all that just to hear how that goes down with you based on the fact that you're a professor of religion.
I think you're totally right. Every good solution comes from an analysis, an indictment of the human condition. And that at that level, the Christian framework would be, we're trying to decide just how much our hunger is. One theological interpretation is that it is entirely just evidence of our sin and our fallenness, and shows then that we have to be utterly redeemed. Or in this version that, Father Ron and others propose is that it's a much more neutral, not indictment, but just description of our desire to be set on a journey, as long as we're pointed in a particular direction. And I think in that case, I had previously imagined it much more like in the Buddhist framework, as a kind of indictment against hunger itself. I just remember the feeling of when I moved from kind of being a cancer patient all the time to feeling like I was back to being a person. I wondered why the hunger kind of came roaring back to life. And it didn't feel like it was, just for weight loss and diamond medallion status and for that kind of thing. It felt like this roaring desire to be alive, but that aliveness felt almost identical with almost just wanting to eat the whole world. And that also just felt like being back in love in a different way. The
ache in some way felt identical to being in love, like you were feeling joy in the achiness?
There's this quality of wanting more that's so specific to us being on this path. I'm giving an example about the way that ache isn't necessarily a negative. It can feel very similar to when you look at your kid, and in it is so much fear that you can't protect them from the world, and then so much love, and I'll eat you up, I love you so. And you'll never look at them and think and that was great, and we did it, and we loved each other, and we actually had enough memories. I had 6 core memories with you. That's we're fine. There's this thing about the nature of, I think, our hungers is that there will never be enough, and that the moreness of love makes more, which will always be tinged with both hunger and pain and love. And I think framed in that way, the ache doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. It can just be this kind of engine that is propelling us, that we just have to, but we do have to set the compass.
It's a positive spin on the hunger in that it points you in a direction.
Yeah.
That maybe it's not a hole you can ever fill, but you can improve your life by listening to what you're hungering for, and would the right word be pursuing it?
Yeah. I mean, I think in that Christian framework, we would call that desire to kind of slowly refine that hunger so that we're consuming the things we should be consuming. We call that sanctification, but we kind of are hoping that it has a kind of a refining quality, that as we go, we hunger for more and more of what's lovely.
Well, actually, there is a Buddhist analog to that. So,
tell me.
Yes, I do want to be careful, because you actually know what you're talking about, and I'm a little bit like the guy who slept at a Holiday Inn last night when I'm talking about Buddhism. But I'm going to do my best here. In Buddhism, the problem is hunger, or thirst, as it's sometimes translated. I think the ancient word for it is tanha. So it really is actually thirst, but this unquenchability, this, insatiability, that is the problem. But there's also chanda, which is the ancient word for a healthy desire for enlightenment. So it would be, I think, the Buddhist analog for sanctification.
I've heard of chanda, but not a Buddhism scholar, but that's I think it sounds like both frameworks have a kind of the hero's journey aspect, in which we have this narrow window of what's possible. And we have a set of beautiful things, virtues that we're hoping that we can cultivate. And then doing so, it kind of it pushes us along a path.
Well, so let me see if I can say how this has worked for me, or how I think it's worked for me, and just tell me if this sounds like it kind of fits the paradigm you're proposing here. I've had several experiences, again, like usually on meditation retreat, especially in the early days, where there's a homesickness or a loneliness or both.
Yeah.
But it's not just that I miss my family, which I do. It's a kind of much more like primordial pining. And it's not just like, I'm eating this dish and it could use some more salt. It's much more fundamental.
Yeah.
I have learned over time to tune into that and realize that what I really thirsting for, but in the Chanda sense, is better and fuller relationships.
That's beautiful. And especially now when we've got this sort of very strange buffet in front of us and people are not sure what to want right now. I mean, one enormous worry I think we should have is for people who've decided not to want anything. The amount of like nihilism in our culture right now of people who feel because they're so hopeless that it doesn't matter what they hunger for. The amount of like online gaming, what that reflects about people's lack of belief that it matters if they save for the future because no one cares about their work and AI is going to take their job. Like this spinning story of like how nothing we do matters. And you can just like take what's there. Just take what's there. It has created a real confusion for a lot of us about like what is worth wanting right now and does it matter? And so anything I think that furthers our conversation about how we can hope that our hungers can fuel us and sustain us for relationship, for love, for like these little cousins of joy, like for hope, for delight, for service. Like those are these things that like, I think we can tell that we're headed in the right direction when we start to see that they want a future for us and for other people. Like they inherently make us more self-sacrificing, more in tune with like the world and other people. The ones I really worry about are the desires that are just these like endless small flames and they're burning everybody up.
I saw a video the other day on TikTok. I've said this publicly before, but I'll just say it again. I don't have Instagram on my phone because it makes me miserable, but I actually like TikTok because I've trained the algorithm to only feed me comedy clips and animal videos and emotional reunions.
Squirrels becoming friends with somebody? Amazing.
So it actually is for the 15 minutes a day that I do it. And I actually don't find myself wanting to do it for much more than that. But for the 15 minutes a day that I do it, or maybe sometimes on a particularly lazy day, 30, it is really actually fun. Anyway, I saw a video the other day of this guy saying, they keep saying AI is going to like take our jobs. Like, when will that happen? I want it to take my job. That's a funny version of it. But I do think the nihilism that you're talking about gives us Trump. You know, it's like this burn it all down, Joker-esque. Let's elect the orange line guy because it's all a game and none of it matters.
Yeah, none of it matters is a really terrifying poison in the water right now.
Yes.
And it's hard to convince people what hope is for specifically, like, and what hope will mean. Hope will mean that democracy is held up by trusted institutions. Hope will mean people can have valuable opinions based on expertise and education to be in service of the broader public. Like, I'm really hoping that like we're going to soon see the tides turn, that like we need the things that shelter us and our communities. And I'm just so worried about the amount that hopelessness is causing people not to worry about the institutions that are crumbling around us that like genuinely need our support, like the news, like higher ed.
Yeah, and like the government itself. Like
the government, like voting processes, like people who sign up to work at the ballot. I cry every time I see people. I started voting. I'm only just gotten American citizenship. And
where are you from originally?
Oh, I am the most Canadian.
Yeah. I was going to guess that. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So you just got American citizenship. Sorry.
Because I didn't want to be ejected from this country for free speech is why I did that. I just cry looking at the people volunteering at the voting booths. Like this is just small acts of hopefulness in the way that all of our small actions contribute to trusted communities. One of the things that should really worry us, honestly, is like the decline in a certain kind of volunteerism rates. If you look at like about a quarter of Americans volunteer, and those are very steady numbers since 1970s that we can track them. But the kind of volunteer has changed, in which they're typically, they used to be people who volunteered in their community the same way every time. And now we have the same amount of volunteers, but they're only doing intermittent volunteering. So people are not able to get the benefit from having these like long form secondary ties to communities that they otherwise don't necessarily feel tied to. And what's so good about long form ties is it makes you buy in to the power of these communities and these institutions. And so I worry that people don't get like the long form view of just how precious and meaningful that their small acts of service are.
Well said. Back to your book, again, Joyful Anyway. There's a thing in the book that I just kind of leaped out at me. The idea of loving the people God puts in your way. And I was put in mind of that when you referenced unsolicited, the election workers.
Oh, yes. I've had this like little habit of going on these really strange adventures because one of the things that delights me is going to visit world's largest things, or like, so I have this app that I look at called Roadside America, which works in Canada and the United States. And you can just like pick a random thing and go see it. And I had a couple extra hours after I had given a commencement address in rural Pennsylvania. And I talked to this poor old man driver, like, and I don't mean old, like just normal, like nice tablecloth, go out to a 4:00 dinner old. I mean like translucent under sunlight old, like should not be on the road. It is not safe for any of us old. And I took this poor sweet man on one of my little adventures. And I just boondoggled the crap out of that poor man. And we were like up and around and into a graveyard, which he thought was to visit a member of my family, which it turns out I'd taken him to see what was supposed to be the most documented victim of spontaneous combustion, which is of course not a real phenomenon, but we were doing just ridiculous things. And I was like, this poor sweet man was so kind and told me about his unbelievable life, which included taking care of so many foster kids and like just one of those hearts that like unfold like origami, where they're just like, there's more and more and more in there. And I was like, wait a minute, like, whoa, how do I be you? Like, what's your best advice for being 84? And also, why did you let me take you to do all these ridiculous things when you were supposed to just take me to the airport? And then he was like, look, I just, in referencing all the kids he'd taken care of. And he just said, when I felt my life going in a certain way, like a way I didn't want and I didn't plan, I just found that if I just start to love the people that God puts in my way, if I treat not just things randomly, it's not just things as they come, but if I treat them like an assignment, I will always be busy. Love as an assignment. And then today, my assignment was you. And I was like, you beautiful, precious, very impressionable man. I took from that like the intimacy between joy and service and joy and surprise and joy and letting new things open up your heart and delight you. And that you could then become someone who is even more and more grateful for the things that you didn't choose. And I thought that love as an assignment sounds like the fastest superhighway to joy that I had heard.
It's really interesting because there is all this science around so-called micro interactions, or Dr. Amir Levine, the guy who wrote Attached, calls them seemies, seemingly insignificant minor interactions. That these are like if you're not paying attention to these, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, happiness-wise. Like when we use the word random, we mean it, I think, even if only mildly, as a pejorative. But to think of it more as an assignment, whether you believe in God or not, like karma, for those of us who are non-believers, karma, just as a law of cause and effect, has placed whoever's in front of you, whether they are clearly, in the case of your driver, in need of like a do not resuscitate bracelet or whatever, they're in front of you. Instead of treating them as like obstacles or random or something to be ignored, like, oh no, this is the assignment. That's a very interesting approach to life.
when I see someone like that then respond to the world, there's a little bit more like pliancy in it. There's just a little more give. There's like, there's an openness to things not being like they were set on the calendar. And I am like, as a person who is very defined by their calendar, who has plans, like, I think that's an invitation to me to like let some things break in and be a gift. I think it also just reminds me that like when things go radically off course, one thing that is constantly meaningful to people is to be able to say, is there something here too for me? Even if nobody planned this and maybe nobody caused it, but is there still some small gift in here for me? Mm-hmm. And I've spent, the last really like since my diagnosis, like listening to people tell stories of a life they didn't choose. And one thing I have found over and over again is like, without having to say it was worth it, can we still find these treasures in the dark? And I think knowing that joy is one of those things that we have an enormous capacity for as people, like a huge capacity to be joyful no matter what, that we're in fact psychologically like well primed for it, then that the world, of course, will give us endless opportunities to be disappointed and to be set back. But knowing that if even there joy can visit you, I think we would feel like a lot more peace in our hearts, knowing that on this path, we will find joy has found us again and again and again.
That seems like a rousing peroration on which we can probably close. That said, anything that we missed?
No, I can read you texts from my mom, though, or just anything else going on in my life.
Folks, we're out of time. We got to hit a commercial break. Back into news anchor mode. Bill, this was a total pleasure. Can you just remind everybody of the name of your book and also of the other books and of your podcast and just like plug everything, please?
Yeah, sure. My book is called Joyful Anyway. And I have a podcast called, and a Substack called Everything Happens. Not everything happens for a reason, just everything happens, period. And if anyone wants to find me on socials, I'm at Kate C. Bowler.
Prior books.
Yeah, I'm most known for the book Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, and a book called No Cure for Being Human. And I've written a lot of kind of devotional books, like day-to-day kind of things, little reflections, called Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day, and one called Good Enough. And I think my favorite is The Lives We Actually Have.
Kate Bowler, great to meet you.
This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much to everybody who works so hard to make this show. 10% Happier is produced by Tara Anderson and Eleanor Vasili. Our recording and engineering is handled by the great folks over at Pod People. Lauren Smith is our managing producer. Marissa Schneiderman is our senior producer. DJ Kashmir is our executive producer. And Nick Thorburn of the great indie rock band Islands wrote our theme. Also, one last thing before you go, remember to sign up for my new app, which is called 10% with Dan Harris. You can sign up over at danharris.com. On the app, you'll find a growing library of meditations from world-class teachers, ad-free access to the full expertise of our podcast guests, meaning you'll get this podcast with no ads, exclusive live stream events, which we do weekly, sometimes twice a week, robust discussion threads to connect you with our team, with our teachers, and with one another. There's a free 14-day trial if you want to try before you buy. Peace.